welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about 10 books that have dragons in them. So this was actually way harder than I thought it was going to be, because when I think fantasy, I think dragons, but like actually gathering 10 books that have dragons in them is way harder than I thought. And I think if maybe you go to more traditional fantasy, it had a lot more dragons, but nowadays people have their own unique creatures. So yeah, but anyways, let's get started. Here are my top 10. I'm going to start the video with The Hobbit because it would not be a video about fantasy without Lord of the Rings in it of some sort. For those of you who don't know, The Hobbit follows a young hobbit named Bilbo Baggins who is swept on an adventure with a wizard and a bunch of dwarves to try and get their mountain back from a dragon called Smaug. So very traditional fantasy. I think the first Tolkien wrote in this world, and it's cute, definitely for children, but you can't mention a book about dragons without talking about Smaug. So yeah, that's the first one. The next book I want to talk about is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winters. So this is a revenge fantasy. We are set in a world where a people is basically in an endless war, and 1 in every 2,000 women can call down dragons. So we follow Tao, who is a young boy, and in this world every person is required to enter military service for a certain amount of time. As I said, they're in a huge war. So he has a plan to get out of this service, but things change when someone close to him is brutally murdered, so he decides to join the army and climb the ranks so that he can get revenge on those who wronged him and his family. This world is great. That you don't see you do see dragons in the first one, but they are not quite as prevalent as I hear they are in the second one. And can we just admire this cover? It's so pretty. But yeah, I loved this book. I think it's really good, and I definitely recommend it. Next book on the list is actually called Heartstone. This is the second book, Dragon Shadow. My sister is borrowing my copy of the first book, but this is a Pride and Prejudice retelling with dragons. So instead of Mr. Darcy being a rich lord from out of town, he is a rich lord dragon rider from out of town. Our Lizzie Bennet is a small town country girl who houses the dragon riders for a while. Yeah, it is. I read Pride and Prejudice right before I read Heartstone, and they are almost beat for beat exactly the same, except it has fantasy elements. The second and third book obviously expand on the world, but yeah, I love the first one. The second and third one are pretty good, but I absolutely recommend the first one. It can be read as a standalone. Yeah, so that's that one. The next book I want to talk about is Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is the third book in the Farseer trilogy. Really, any of the Farseer books would work. I just happen to own the third one because I have this special edition my sister got me. So it is the Farseer trilogy follows our main character Fitz, who is a young boy. He is the bastard son of who was going to be the king, but he abdicated when he found out he had created a bastard. Fitz is dropped off by his maternal grandfather at the keep when he is 6 years old, and he is raised there as the bastard son. He learns to serve the crown despite not having the pure line blood. So yeah, there are lots of magical creatures in here. It includes dragons. You can see the cover has one. Yeah, this series is very popular. Everyone loves it, and I never want to deter anyone from reading it. It is not my favorite series in the world. Robin Hobb's writing style just doesn't jive with me quite as well. She's very slow paced, and then the endings are very fast paced. But yeah, this one is good, and I know a lot of people love it, so I do still recommend it. It's just not my necessary cup of tea. Next book I want to mention is The Shadow of the Gods by Gwynne. So this is the first book in the Bloodsworn trilogy. So in this world, we are following three people. It is a Norse fantasy. We are following Orca, who is a mother who lives on basically a homestead out in the middle of nowhere. A child goes missing and his parents are murdered, so she and her husband are kind of investigating that. We have We follow Elvar, who is a noblewoman who has decided she does not want to follow in those footsteps, and she has joined a warband to try to gain honor. And we are following Varg, who is a thrall, which is like basically a slave in this world, who has run away and joined another warband called the Bloodsworn. So in this world, there were gods who, in a long time ago, basically fought each other, changed the world. It was this book's version of Ragnarok, and they all died out except one, the dragon god, who was trapped underground and eats the souls of the dead if they are not armed as they go into the afterlife. So I loved this series. I read it last year. I mean, there's 2 books out right now. I think it's excellent and I absolutely recommend it. The vibes are fantastic. I love the found family with the Bloodsworn, and Orca is such a wonderful murderous mommy. And that's really all I've got for that. But yeah, definitely recommend this series. Next book series I want to recommend is called the Winnowing Flame Trilogy. This is actually the second book, The Bitter Twins. The first one is called The Ninth Reign. I'm going to pick this one because it's got the dragon on the cover. Every 1,000 years or so, an alien species invades, and up until the last invasion, a race called the Aborans on their war beasts fought off this alien invasion. Aborans are vampire-like creatures, but instead of drinking human blood, they drink the sap of a great tree, which gives them immortal life, enhanced abilities, that kind of stuff. After the last battle, the aliens were defeated, but the tree basically shriveled up and died. And so the war beasts are reborn from the tree, so no more war beasts, and the Aborans no longer had a food source. They did turn to drinking human blood, so it does have that vampire aspect. However, the human blood gives them a sickness, which basically kills them. So in order to live, they have to drink blood, but the blood kills them faster, so they're kind of in a no-win situation. But yeah, the dragons are part of the war beasts, and we follow an Aboran and a human scholar and something called a fell witch, who is another magical creature being in these novels. They have fire magic. So yeah, I really liked this one. I've only read Ninth Reign. I haven't continued on with Bitter Twins, but this is a completed trilogy, and I do want to finish this trilogy this year. But I really thought the world was very interesting. I thought the characters were nice. I liked the twist on the vampire stuff. So yeah. Next book series I want to talk about is The Chorus of Dragons by Jenn Lyons. The first book is The Ruin of Kings. So in our first book, we follow Kieran, who is a young thief who is discovered one day to be the son of a prince. And so he is kind of taken into that prince's world and navigates that. We find out that he is part of a prophecy, and it is prophesied that he is not going to save the world, but end it. So it kind of follows that. And the story is told really interestingly. It is split timeline. So in the beginning, we happen upon Kieran and his captor, a creature named Talon. And Talon asks Kieran to tell his life story. So he begins telling his story, but then she interrupts because she's a mind reader, so she actually already knows the story. And she goes, no, you need to start at the beginning. So we have half of the book is Talon's story, telling the story of Kieran as a young boy, and half of it is Kieran telling the story of his later years. And eventually they meet up, and we meet up with where Kieran is in the story right now. There are 9 immortal dragons in this book. Each of them have a different personality and powers. And yeah, I love this series. I read it. I know I finished it last year. I can't remember if I started it the year before, but I binged the 4 books that were out probably within like a month, and then I had to wait for the 5th one when it came out. It was, the ending was good too. So yeah, I absolutely recommend this series. It's a very interesting storytelling. I like the dragons, I like the magic, and I love the characters. Yeah. Similar to Tolkien, I don't feel like it would be a dragon list without Eragon. So Eragon follows a young boy named Aragon who lives in a small village outside of a mountain, and one day a dragon egg mysteriously appears in front of him and then hatches for him, and we follow him on his journey throughout the world to fight eventually Galbatorix, who is the basically tyrant king, who is also a dragon rider. This was one of my first big fantasy series I read. I loved Aragon. I remember I couldn't wait until Eldest came out, and then the third and fourth book came out and I wasn't as on board, but I still reread the first book sometimes just for the nostalgia because I love that one. But yeah, it was definitely an era of fantasy, and I just feel like it wouldn't be a dragon list without mentioning Aragon. Ninth book, almost there. So the next series I want to recommend is A Pattern of Shadow and Light by Melissa McPhail. So there are 6 books in this series. The 7th one is partially written, and the author passed away, so they're trying to decide how to finish that. But I would read the first 6 even without knowing what happened at the end. These are so good, and I will talk about them until someone else reads them besides me. In this world, we follow 2 boys. One is Ian. He is a prince who has been in hiding for many years and is going back to his kingdom. On the way, he is attacked and his best friend is killed. After his best friend is killed, Ian goes on a quest to try to find and take care of the assassin who killed his blood brother. The other man we follow is Trell. He is a man fighting in a desert war, and he has no memories past the 5 years ago when he was found on the shores of the river. So we kind of follow him as he goes on his journey to try to figure out who he is, and meets up with some characters who are sworn to someone called the Fifth Vestal, who is a man who betrayed the world 300 years ago during something called the Adept Wars and basically sent their world on the path to destruction. So he has to kind of try to navigate those waters while he tries to figure out who he is. That is, again, just the beginning. There's 6 books in this series. This is probably the smallest one. They are chunky, but I absolutely recommend this. And the dragons in here are, again, as most dragons are, immortal creatures, and they have both a human form and a dragon form, so we get to see them fighting and be badass, and we also get their quirky little human traits. So I love the dragons in here. They're definitely my favorite part. The last book I want to talk about is called Fireborne by Rosaria Munda, and this is the only one I don't own physically. It is a Russian Revolution retelling with dragons. So we follow our main characters, Annie and Lee, and when they were children, basically the Russian Revolution happened and the dragon riders were overthrown. Up until that point, only people from certain families could be dragon riders. So the revolution happens, everything is equalized, and now they are working on training new dragon riders from the common people. So Annie is a common farm girl whose family was murdered by the dragon lords. And Lee is one of the dragon lord's children who was saved during the revolution, and has been keeping his identity a secret since then. Both are in training to become the lead dragon rider. I do not remember what it is called. But yeah, I really liked this book. I thought it was really interesting. I liked the characters. I liked the history retelling. I thought that was fun. And the interactions with the dragons was really cool. I believe there are 3 types of dragons in this world. So that is my list of 10 books with dragons. Again, this list was way harder to come up with than I thought. And again, I was trying to pick something off my shelves, which probably made it a little bit harder, but still. Do you guys have any dragon book recommendations for me? I would love to read more about them. They're one of my favorite magical creatures. And if you made it to the end of this video, please give me a little dragon emoji, and I will see you guys later. Bye.